usually get a notification, I think, on the screen. Fabulous. That's great, Katie. We are recording. And so therefore, I will say a warm good morning and welcome to everybody to our Board of Directors meeting here in public. So, of course, we are working online today, and perhaps with the weather, some of us have appreciated that. Those of us that have not had to commute, I do know others will have done, of course. But for those of us that can simply log on and be part of the team, then isn't that great? So it works quite well. So, good morning and welcome everybody to our Board of Directors. This meeting is being recorded and will be published, of course, so be aware that we are, as always, transparent and democratic in the sense of being open and accountable to our public, the people of Bradford and beyond. So great to have you all with us. If I just deal quickly with any apologies. So I do know that Mel has given some quite short notice. She was in touch with me yesterday. Apologies. So I realise she has a couple of personal commitments that have taken her up now for a day or two. And John, am I right in thinking that you're going to step in as CEO for the purpose of board today, please?
Yeah, for the purpose of Mel's update and anything else that she would have attended to. Yes, that's right.
Fabulous. Thank you very much indeed, John. That's great. Okay, so hopefully Mel's fine, but I do realise it was quite short notice. That's unusual for Mel, to be fair, so hopefully things are okay. I do also know that some colleagues, John Prashar, Sugra, Mohammed and Paul Rice, thank you, may just have to dip out of the call at some time during the course of the day due to some existing commitments that they're trying to manage in between, either personal or business. And that's, of course, understood. And as chair, I always appreciate the courtesy of being informed of that. So thank you very much. Just on a couple more personal matters. Janet Hurst, our medical school non-executive colleague, is here at her last, but thankfully I can see you on screen actually, Janet. I don't have to go to the big screen thing, but the I've 9 or 10 tiles. And so Janet's with us here for the last board meeting, and I know genuinely and sincerely how much we all think of Janet and how much she's given us over the sort of 18 months or so, I think, that she's been with us. So wise counsel, fantastic knowledge, and of course bringing, where necessary, an academic perspective and definitely a great analytical approach to the role of non-executive. So colleagues, I don't know if anybody wants to shout anything up, but of course I'll ask Janet if she wishes to say a word, but would you join me in publicly and sincerely thanking Janet for everything she's done for this hospital trust? You've been a terrific colleague and team member, Janet, so thank you. Janet, would you don't have to, of course, but would you wish to say anything to colleagues before we start?
Well, I just thank you for those kind words, Max. Over and beyond, perhaps from my point of view, but that's very, very kind. No. Do you know, well, you made me quite emotional. It's been a thrill, it's been a pleasure. I'm in awe of the talent, and I'm very reassured because this is my local hospital. I'm very reassured, and as a listening organisation, the challenges are huge, and we don't hear enough of the good stuff because we get an awful lot right. We hear an awful lot of the things that have challenged us beyond belief, but I feel it has been a privilege and stretched me in my thinking, and it's been. I'm sad to leave, but obviously it's the rite of passage in the nature of my arrangement with the trust. But absolutely in awe of the talent and commitment. So I feel very, very reassured and assured, and it's been. Thank you all for your kindness and generosity when I didn't understand, which might come out today again.
There's also a comment in chat, Janet, that my words were sincere, I assure you, and I know how colleagues feel about you around the virtual table as well. So it's been wonderful working with you, and good for you, because you're right. Your point there about perhaps we don't always hear enough about the good stuff, indeed came up in my meeting with governors just last week, where we talked about how the press can pick up on a story, and it's not always easy for us to robustly defend that because of particular private circumstances of the case or that sort of thing. And so very, very good point. Yeah. And Ray, please do come in.
Yeah, thanks, Max. Just to add, thanks on my personal behalf and also on behalf of my exec colleagues as well. Janet, obviously I was one of the initial points of contact, I think, with the trust, and we talked about the role before you joined us. And again, just as Max has said, you've been a fantastic colleague, fair, intelligent challenge always, but absolutely supportive all the way through. You've helped us with the development of the Quality and Patient Safety Academy and been a hugely important member of that. So thank you on all our behalves for everything that you've done in our time with us, and I wish you the very best of everything for your future endeavours.
Thank you very much. That's really, really appreciated, Ray.
Well said, Ray. And I can see
everyone.
from nods around the table, you speak for us all. That's fantastic. There's some comments in chat as well, Janet. Thank you. We've a job to do now, Janet, haven't we? But we've got a job to do now to replace you with somebody that brings the quality you do. So, and we will do that. We will do that. Yeah. Thanks very much, Janet. And thank you for those comments, Ray, as well. That's great. Okay. May I also, on my final personal point, can I just commend and compliment Saj for giving up some of his time at reasonably short notice on Thursday to a briefing with governors. So colleagues will know that every couple of months I have an informal meeting with governors, allowing them to talk to me about anything that's required. And it was I was given notification that they'd like to be informed just on performance, particularly over the kind of winter Christmas period, and knowing what we see in the press about the challenges and difficulties. And honestly, and I'm not just saying it because we're an open public board, etc., but Saj did a terrific briefing, as he always does. Saj's use of lay language and ability to explain some complex circumstances are superb. And it was really kind of Saj to give, and it was the usual thing where Max said, just 20 minutes. And I think it was a good 50 minutes or so, wasn't it, Saj, that you were with us. But that's because the governors were genuinely engaged and interested. So may I just publicly thank and record my appreciation for a chief operating officer who can give up an hour of his time in order to allow governors to be briefed face-to-face, directly from the person who's actually running that particular aspect of our operation. So, Saj, well done and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Max, and it's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks very
much indeed, Saj. It was really helpful.
That's nice for you to say so, David. Thank you. Wasn't it good? Yeah, it really felt like an in-depth, detailed understanding of exactly where we are. So great stuff. Thank you. Thank you, David. Yeah. John, may I just turn back to you, because I do know that we've had a couple of bits of sad news in the trust. I think one of which we can talk about is my understanding. So, John, we've lost a colleague, and we wish, I think, to reflect and recognise that. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, John, but my understanding was that you would be best placed perhaps to say a word to colleagues about that.
Yeah, just briefly, I think there's probably another occasion when we need to do this and recognise more formally. So I think we're all reeling from the shock of hearing that Dr. Paul Southern passed away earlier this week. It was very sudden. I think it's hit everybody hard. Paul was a fantastic clinician, a really warm, friendly and supportive colleague. I know there's a lot of people around this table who worked with him in lots of different ways. He leaves a massive legacy for the trust that we probably don't fully appreciate in terms of the rollout of electronic patient record in 2017 and ever since. You referred to Saj there using lay language to make complicated concepts clear. I think that's a skill that Paul had in abundance. And, we owe him a huge debt of gratitude. And I know colleagues around the table, as I say, possibly isn't the place that we need to find another forum for this, and for all colleagues who pass away. But it's hit us hard at a busy time when there's a lot going on. It puts everything in perspective. It makes you realise what really matters, and Paul's loss is keenly felt. I don't know if any of my other colleagues want to add anything, but but all of the executive team, and I hope non-exec colleagues too, will appreciate a life well lived, a very, very decent man, and a huge talent who will be greatly missed.
Well said, John.
You were correct, Max, in saying another colleague has passed away. For reasons I can't easily disclose here, we're not able to talk more about that at the moment. We will do in due course. We will absolutely recognise their passing, but we just can't say more about that at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's true. Thank you very much, John. I guess, John, you would be available to any colleague if they don't know about that other situation. Yeah,
of course.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much, John. Ray, please do come in.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, I've known Paul for many years, since he started working in the trust, both as a fellow clinician, caring for patients together, and also more recently, of course, through my role as CMO. And I've seen the work that he did in all of the roles, and it was evident from walking around the organisation the day after the news broke that he touched really everybody in the trust, both from his clinical work and of course his digital work. John's already mentioned the EPR that Paul was absolutely instrumental in the introduction of. But I think probably maybe everybody here doesn't know about his work with the vaccine rollout as well. He was absolutely pivotal to that. The degree of upset and love that we saw as we walked round, I think really demonstrated how much he touched everybody in the organisation. And I've had messages from all over Wyatt, from colleagues in all sorts of roles, saying how sorry they were to hear about Paul's passing, because it wasn't just within our organisation, it was a much wider platform than that. He will be enormously missed. I can't begin to describe how much he'll be missed. He was a fantastic colleague, but more importantly, he was a fantastic human being. He gave time for everybody. He never said no, sometimes perhaps to his detriment, but he was genuinely one of the best colleagues I've ever had the privilege to work with, just feelings for his wife, his 3 children, and the many friends that he leaves behind. So thank you, Max.
No, and well said, Ray. Yeah, much too young and a dreadful loss. Yeah, Paul, please do come in.
Yeah, thanks, Max. And I mean, Ray said many of the things that I wanted to say. I mean, it's not often that also you make new friends in your 50s, but I mean, I arrived here 2 years ago, and Paul's a huge loss. Kay Pagan, who is the Chief Nursing Information Officer, and I visited his home last night, saw his wife and young family. I would say that the outpouring of affection, Charlotte really appreciates the support of the hospital and the wider community in this context. People sometimes think, what can I misstep here in how I express my affections? I would just say, you can't. So in any shape or form that you do want to mark that as individuals, and as John highlighted, we will mark that collectively. But there's a huge amount of love being felt and a huge amount of appreciation for the clinician, the informatics leader, and the man. So huge. As the phrase was, a Paul-sized hole, and absolutely there's a Paul-sized hole for everybody this week.
Yes, yeah. Well said, Paul. Thank you very much for visiting and passing our sincere regards, and condolences. Thank you very much, Paul. Yeah. Well, I'm sure colleagues will join me in those that pray, praying that Paul rest in peace, and indeed those that don't pray but would wish that Paul rest in peace. And let's hope that he does so. So thanks, everybody. Thank you. Okay. Well, we've business to get on with, and Paul would have wanted us, of course, to get on with what's to be done. Can I just remind colleagues of what the agenda looks like? We're going to begin, of course, by hearing from our vascular team, and we look forward to doing that. And in a moment, I'll turn to Sarge and ask him to welcome the vascular team, introduce them, and we can think about how they're doing 2 years on after the reconfiguration. We'll deal with our normal reports and things. We've got a green plan update and a Shipley Hospital update, anti-poverty strategy. Then we'll go through the academy work, of course. There are some matters to approve within quality for maternity. There's a matter to approve within people for the nurse staffing review. And you can see there's 5 recommendations there. And we'll also hear, of course, regarding our finance and performance issues. And then we'll deal with partnerships, audit and assurance. Again, there's a request, please, colleagues, if we would consider a case for change in respect of the Bradford Hospital charity. And that reflects the terrific work that Sharon Milner, our new director there, has been doing in her recent weeks of appointment. Just let Mohammed join us. There you go. Good morning, Mohammed. I hope you can hear okay. I know Mohammed's joined anyway. He may well be on phone. As we get into governance, again, there's a couple of matters to approve there, which relate to the Nominations Remunerations Committee and our corporate strategy board reporting arrangements, which I know has taken up quite a bit of our time just to get that right. I do also appreciate that there are various views about the correct way in which that should be done, but I do compliment those involved for trying to do that and bringing that together. Let's see if we can get an agreement on that. I do that because, for two reasons. I run through the agenda quickly to remind people what's there, and of course to ask two questions. Does any other business arise that's not on the agenda that anybody would wish me to make time for, please? It would appear not. I appreciate there's plenty there today. And of course, we do go into a closed meeting session later where matters shouldn't be played out in the public domain, perhaps for economic reasons, for example. OK, that's fine. And then in terms of the agenda, are there any particular declarations of interest from this matter that need to be noted, please? Laura, would you like to come in, please?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to flag under item 22 around the Code of Governance and Guidance on Good Governance and Collaboration. There is a point in there around sort of the appointment of the company secretary, so and how that appointment's made. So obviously I'll be there for that item and I'll be presenting it, but if the board wants me to leave to discuss that point, I'm happy to do so. Thanks
very much, Laura. That's sensible of you to bring that up, and we'll deal with that as it comes, but I would imagine you'd be able to stay with us pending any issues being raised. And I would, of course, defer to any director that had a different view. But thanks for bringing that up, Laura. That's sensible. Thank you. OK, so we've dealt with whether there's any other business. We've looked at declarations of interest. So shall we get into hearing from our vascular team and the clinical service unit, relevant clinical service unit there? I'll try and build in some breaks, of course, because I know we've got a long day, lots to consider. But shall we turn to Sarge now then, please, and give him the chance to introduce the team. And those colleagues who've joined us from the vascular team, I know we're perhaps a little later than we would normally be, but you'll have heard as to why there was just a bit of a delay as we began board meeting. So, Sarge, may I turn to you, please?
Thank you very much, Max. And Janet, you'll be pleased to know on your last board meeting, this is very much a good news story that you'll be hearing from Kevin and colleagues, where we have been working across YVAS to implement the second arterial centre and the designation of becoming a second arterial centre, and the great work that the team have been undertaking over the last 2 years. Well, actually longer than that in terms of lead up, and certainly over the last 2 years since we've gone live. So in terms of this item of getting to know the CSUs in true BTHFT style, there is a presentation which Kevin and colleagues are going to run through, and I hope we'll really be able to demonstrate the journey that they've taken, the impact that has in terms of quality for our patients, and of course we'll open up for any questions to board. I know there's a number of colleagues on this call, and when I hand over to Kevin, I'll ask him to introduce those colleagues. And I know there's colleagues who've contributed and who've been part of this who aren't on this call as well. And so to those colleagues, we're really grateful for all of their input. So without further ado, Chair, I'll pass over to Kevin and colleagues that are on this call. They have got a presentation that they'll be running us through as well.
Great stuff. Thank you, Sarge. Good morning and welcome, Kevin and colleagues. And in true BTHFT style, we're coming to you slightly late in this board meeting, but do not feel rushed. You still have the time that you would have wanted to talk to us. We want to hear from you. So, Kevin. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're coming through clearly. Yeah.
So I'm Kevin Mercer. I'm a specialty lead for vascular surgery. I'm here in the vascular offices with Rob Guest, who's the general manager for surgery and digestive diseases, and Shauna Flanagan, who's the deputy matron with particular responsibility for vascular. And then online, I think we've got Claire Vickers, who's the YVAS lead nurse, and I did see Jane Lang at one moment. I was going to somebody. Can I share this? Can I share the slides? Is that okay?
The slides are up for us now, Kevin.
Oh, what have I done?
That's fine. We have a slide in front of us. Yeah.
Am I in control of that, or has that just changed, or is that?
Yeah, no, you're in control of it, Kevin. That slide's your slide as well. And just in terms of your question, yes, I've seen Jane on the call as well. Jane Lang is on the call.
Thank you. So, so hopefully we're on the YVAS slide here. YVAS stands for West Yorkshire Vascular Service. And this was something that's been in generation for a number of years now, with regards particularly to sort of vascular specifications and the ambitions to provide high quality services compliant with national specifications. The decision was made that we would create something that worked across the whole of West Yorkshire. The history is long, but a couple of years ago, we were in a position where YVAS East consisted of Leeds and Mid Yorks, and they'd merged in many ways a number of years ago. We were slightly more separate, and we went live in November 2020 with a centralised arterial service in Bradford, amalgamating the arterial centres from Calderdale and Huddersfield, and also bringing in work from the non-arterial centre in Airedale that Bradford had been working with for a number of years. And that creates for us an opportunity to build on some of the national service specifications and implement some of the working that's facilitated by a service that covers a population of a little over 1 million people. And it makes it an attractive place for people to work, and people, surgeons who are finishing training are looking to work in centres that really offer the sort of highest quality services and the best ways of working. One of the first things that we did, well, day one, was consultant of the week model, and an increase in theatre capacity to deliver the arterial service. And that means that we've got a consultant on every day who's dedicated entirely to flow of the ward, the acute admissions, and managing the acute patients. And we continue to provide outpatients, day case surgery and endovascular treatments in the arterial and non-arterial centres. One of the early benefits of this process was an improvement in recruitment, and we've recruited 3 surgeons to the unit since go live. With YVAS, it is an ongoing project to improve services across the whole of West Yorkshire. We're taking part in a review of East and West, and ongoing work to measure and ensure equal access to time-critical treatments for all the patients, and also standardisation of pathways and work to align the vascular services to the national specifications. One of the first things, I hope you can see regional AHPs now. The opportunity to really develop allied health professional roles has been a massive benefit, and something we really planned for when we were building YVAS. Early on, we recognised that centralisation of arterial services means a lot of patients come a lot further for their arterial care. And when we were planning this, we were worried about how we got people back home. We looked at repatriation models, but that repatriation is a fairly fraught business, especially with sort of bed pressures. And we established quite early on that a lot of vascular patients, once they're ready to leave the vascular unit, actually need therapies support. And we decided to make the policy that we would aim for sort of home first discharge and only repatriate to other hospitals if it was for sort of medical reasons. And that's been quite a success. We've appointed a therapies lead and developed processes with the therapies teams in all of the different areas to allow discharge home much more smoothly than was available sort of 3 or 4 years ago. And I think that has been a massive success story of avoiding repatriation and facilitating discharge home. We've also worked with a secondment to podiatry in secondary care with one of the podiatrists who I think may have spoken to this meeting before, to enhance the care of patients with diabetic foot and non-diabetic foot problems. We've expanded the vascular nurse specialist work. We've now got 4 in post, expanding to 5, and have a community linked post in the pipeline as well. And the model for that across the whole of YVAS has been for the nurse specialist to deliver care in the arterial and non-arterial centres. So it's very much a sort of team across the entire network. And the YVAS team in particular are progressing models of work that will cover the whole YAP patch for that. We've also consolidated our advanced care practitioners on the ward, who, as one of my colleagues told me they would 5 years ago when he came back from working abroad. He said they become the core of the team, and they really have proved themselves to be core members of the team, really important for continuity of care, and also actually to help improve the training experience of our junior doctors, who it's very important for us that they get a good training across the whole of the specialty and return to their colleagues and the deanery to report a good training experience. And I think the nurse specialists, we need to recognise that they really are core to making the trainees' experience about training and not service. And I think it's also important to mention the admin and secretarial support. The teams across all of the organisations have really pulled together with regards to particularly inter-provider transfers, and we've appointed a care coordinator who we're going to mention later when we talk about some of the pathways. Briefly, what that has allowed us to do when we came out of COVID, the first graph here relates to our recovery from venous long waiting times, and we were able to recover very quickly from that. We did notice a marked improvement in our length of stay, our average from 7 down to 5 days. And we think that that relates to the consultant of the week model, and also to the input, particularly of the therapies team, with regards to sort of facilitating discharge. When we were modelling YVAS, we expected, the modelling suggested we would need 42 beds, but because of COVID, we remained within the 28 beds of 26. And we've now reached a point where that has been inadequate. And I think the improvements in length of stay, enhanced flow, and a lot of the work that we've done with the sort of vascular virtual ward and some of the time critical pathway work have really helped us to minimise the number of physical beds we need. And we're doing the work on using the vascular virtual ward as much as we can to facilitate as much care as possible close to home and out of hospital. A lot of vascular surgery is about time critical pathways, and that's really a big focus at the moment. In many ways, this is a list of a lot of the vascular conditions that have a time critical pathway. And in fact, it's almost everything that we do. for years and years, vascular surgery hasn't had targets in quite the same way as cancer. But there are targets now coming online, including a sequin relating to the management of urgent limb-threatening ischemia, that are coming under increasing inspection by the national bodies. And we're doing work to track those through a time-critical pathway database, particularly for the sort of outpatient procedures. And the Vascular Virtual Ward is really doing a lot of good work in terms of limb-threatening ischemia, stroke pathways, and we're trying to expand that with regards to OPAT and supported discharge. A lot of the metrics are reported through the National Vascular Registry, and we're in the process of working up a business case for data support to make sure that we can submit an adequate data set for perusal and inspection by the national bodies, and to demonstrate the services that we're providing, and to drive service improvement, actually, by identifying where the gaps are and what we can do to improve things. And we're very much involved with the virtual hospital and virtual ward projects with Terry Saunderson, trying to work out how the virtual wards work within Cerner, what could be done to make that better, and the parts of the time-critical pathways that have to be monitored outside of Cerner, with particularly the sort of time-stamped events, which sometimes can be a bit more challenging to track, and that we need to really monitor to drive through these pathways. The final big project is the hybrid theatre. This is something that's really hard to do if you're not a proper arterial centre delivering care to a large number of people. But we're now in a position where we can start looking at how we can implement a hybrid theatre in Bradford. It's part of the arterial centre specification, and very much the MHRA recommended way of delivering many of the complex interventions that vascular surgery does these days. We've looked at a number of options. At one point, we were looking at a new build option, but with the modern technology, it does look as if we may be able to do that by developing one of the existing theatres into a hybrid theatre with the capabilities of doing vascular surgery and interventional radiology in a single room. And we're looking, one of the models and one that's looking favourable is developing the theatre adjacent to the current vascular theatre with this in mind. It is an expensive undertaking, and the ICS WIAT offers an opportunity to really look at how we fund this sort of development for the two arterial centres in West Yorkshire. And Jane Lang's been heavily involved in developing the business case. It's been presented to the Bradford executive team, and also just before Christmas, Jane and I went to the Directors of Finance meeting to present the business case and the case for building a hybrid theatre in Bradford. So those are the things that we thought were particularly developments for the YVAS, and how vascular has changed and developed over the 2 years since we went live. So thank you for the time, and thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you very much indeed to you, Kevin, and to all your team who joined us, and of course those who are not able to join us this morning. That seems to me, off the top of my head, that seems to me to be, you know, we have a specialist centre here within our walls, a specialist arterial centre here in Bradford, and it felt to me that Kevin's presentation to us then was demonstrated real patient focus. So I don't know whether people would feel the same, if that's perhaps true, but it certainly felt to me like we've got the best of the best here, specialists working together. We're developing specialists, and we provide a great service to patients. So how lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Kevin. I know colleagues are here as well, but let's open up for any questions, discussion points and thoughts. Karen, may I turn to you first, please? Karen Walker, please.
Thanks, Max. Thanks, Kevin. Really, really useful, a great piece of work. And for me, yes, it was really patient focused, but also incredibly collaborative across West Yorkshire, certainly across the team. And actually, I just wanted to draw out my appreciation of you talking about the support that you get from your admin, your secretarial, care coordinator kind of roles, because it's not often we hear that. So I just wanted to say thank you for drawing out, actually, it's a whole team effort that makes this kind of thing work. Loved the consultant of the week kind of method as well. It seems to be really drawing great results for you. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Karen. Well said. Yeah, and Janet, may I turn to you, please?
I think shared sentiments, really, Karen and Max, and patient-centred, absolutely, inclusive of the multidisciplinary team is a fantastic example. And that's inspiring for all those professions, and not just the healthcare professionals, but, you know, our back office and admin and all the people that help the wheels go around. And that was really appreciated. And I can imagine it is a real traction for people to come and want to learn with you. And so not only do we have a good service, we have a good pipeline, which is great news. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Janet. Yeah. Karen, please do come in.
Yeah, so this has been a long time in coming, really. And just as we were about to start the new joint service, of course, COVID happened. And there was a point where we said, oh, should we not? And we decided to push on. And we're all nervous about that. And it was the right thing to do. But I think what we've learned, and Kevin will admit in the team, that it's been a rocky journey, but one that's ended up actually really quite pleasant, if that's the right word. You know, Kevin's leadership and others' leadership in this have been exemplary. But what we can do is take the learning from this sort of joining of a regional service or a West Yorkshire service for when we look at other services and other service redesigns. Because I think there's stuff that we did well, and there's probably stuff on the journey we could have done a bit better, and we're all the wiser for knowing those things now. So it's just to say thank you to Kevin and the team for being the guinea pig, really, in the first big joining of organisations and services, and well done, because the patient feedback and the stuff that we're hearing back from the service now, it is really good, and it's a good service, and you should be very proud.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kevin. Some organisational learning has developed there. Yes, yeah, very good point. Thank you. May I just check there are no further hands raised? We've obviously all enjoyed hearing and understanding what's going on in vascular. Kevin, you're at the board meeting. All the directors are here. We've just got apologies from Mel today, unusually for this meeting. It's an opportunity to say to us, as your board of directors, if there's anything you feel we could do to perhaps support the continued great work that you're doing. Would you wish, you don't have to, of course, but are there any particular gaps or little areas that you think, can I bring this to your attention? This is something we could maybe do a bit better.
Thank you. I mean, the first thing is to say, I think I've said it before, but it's a good forum to say we were incredibly grateful for the go ahead to go live in the middle of COVID. And I think even, just weeks before, we were wondering whether it would all be stopped. And we were incredibly grateful that because we really did need to make that change, and it was a risk, and we were very grateful that it happened. I think we're also grateful for the support that we've had with the hybrid theatre. I think the next thing that's on my radar in particular is making sure that we really build a robust system for data collection to support the Sequin and all of the reports that we are now starting to have to fill in for the specialist commissioners. And that data support is going to be critically important. And it is putting, I think, vascular on an equal footing with cancer services, which in many ways is overdue, but we really have to respond appropriately to that. request.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kevin and team. And do know, please, that the directors are proud of what's being achieved and want to continue to support this great work. You know, specialist services, such a patient focus. I really like the way that you brought that focus to the presentation, Kevin. Thank you. May I turn finally to Saj then and just ask whether, having heard and listened, Saj, is there anything perhaps at a director level that you would wish to bring to our attention to close this item?
I think, Max, a lot of it's already been said. I think this shows true partnership, people place, all of our sort of working arrangements at a much bigger footprint than just Bradford, and it has highlighted how when we bring teams of people together, how we really can impact positively on patients' journey and outcome. There's more to do, and Kevin's highlighted that. Of course, there is, but 2 years in, fantastic outcomes, fantastic leadership from the team, and really looking forward to the next phase of this with the hybrid theatre, etc., which we're working on. So yeah, so a big thank you for people who worked above and beyond, and yeah, more to come.
Thanks very much. Yeah. So Kevin and team, thank you for the insights and understanding that you've given us, and please be assured of our continued support for what you're doing. This is great news for Bradford Teaching Hospitals and beyond, of course. So as an arterial centre, so well done and thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Thanks, team. I appreciate not everybody spoke, but it was great to have you here and listening, and thanks for all you're doing. Very much appreciated. Okay. Thanks, everybody. And Saj, another great briefing. Thank you. It's the level of insight that we get from that, meeting directly with those doing the job, is great. And to be fair, as directors, it also gives us a chance to maybe pick up on what we think might be a weakness or a gap, and there didn't appear to be any there. And I was really impressed by the obvious patient focus that Kevin and his team appear to be bringing to their work. So that was great. Thanks very much indeed. What a good briefing and encouraging. Thank you, everybody, for the comments as well. Okay, shall we move then to section 2 and deal with the minutes of our meeting in November, which of course was held face to face, wasn't it, in the boardroom? Are there any matters of inaccuracy or amendment that might be required, please, from any director? Can we take those as a true record of the meeting? Thank you, everybody. And in terms of matters arising, of course, we've got 7 actions. I've got my list at the ready. 5 of those are shown as closed. So may I just check that people are content that they are properly closed? There is the request from Mohammed regarding reference to pre-meetings between NEDs and governors being included in reports. There is the themes in relation to freedom of information requests, where further detail was asked and was indeed circulated. There's the frequency of reporting on the logic model or corporate strategy, which of course is an item today in our board meeting. And we have the patient recruitment centre. We do intend to arrange a visit for the patient recruitment centre, and that's now been set for the 28th of February. And then the final action that's closed is the performance oversight in relation to stroke performance, very sensibly raised by one of our non-executive colleagues, and that will indeed, stroke performance oversight will be included in regular report to board. So may I check first that people are content? This is what we're about. If we raise actions, it's to do things. Are we content that they've been done to our satisfaction, those 5? Thank you. And we've 2 which have been deferred or allowed to be heard here. The first is perhaps easy, which is the finance improvement plan, the suggestion that that ought to be part of a future board development session, and we can confirm that that's agreed and the date will be confirmed for that. So may I suggest also that that action can be closed on the basis of we will make sure it's included. It's on the list. I know Laura has that on the piece of paper with the board development sessions. But that's to do, as I say, with the finance improvement plan and our understanding of that. So that's great. And then we just have one, assuming people are happy with that, just one for a verbal briefing, which I will defer to John about. And that was a suggestion regarding recordings being made of face-to-face meetings and published, as these appear to be well received. So it was a suggestion from a non-executive colleague, but I'll turn to John and just ask whether you've had the chance to consider this, John, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We absolutely have. And it's the idea of recordings of meetings to be published. And linked to that, the second point was about facilitating hybrid meetings. And I think what we said was, let's look at the two things together, because there's potentially some kind of, synergy between the two. So that's what we have looked into. We've obtained some quotes for the work to be undertaken. And we've done, with the help of Paul Rice's team, a bit of feasibility to look at hybrid meetings. For the purpose of this meeting, what I will say is I'm confident there is a solution. There's a bit of kind of testing to be done to see how it goes. However, it does involve, for a more detailed explanation, it does involve some commercial information that I don't want to talk about here in open board. So if I may, I'll just take a moment in the closed board later on today to share that. But for the purpose of open board, I'm confident there is a solution that we can find which will address the broader point here about can we share a recording of our board meeting, and is there a way forward with hybrid meetings? So I'll talk about that in a bit more detail later on. I'm confident we can move forward with that, but we will want to just do a bit of testing, probably to sort of try before we buy and see how it works for us.
John, thank you very much indeed. And I think Mohammed has anticipated that I would have perhaps come to him just to ask whether he was satisfied. I can see from the comment that he's indeed. So thank you for that, John. I realise there's plenty to talk about there, and we'll perhaps do that a little later today in the closed session. Yeah. Okay. And John, would you like to come in, please? John Prashad.
Yeah, thanks, Max. Can you hear me okay? I've just got.
Yes, you're coming through clearly. Thanks, John.
John, I just wanted to check that as part of that testing, we were going to thoroughly investigate the issue of how in hybrid meetings those people on virtual access can get proper engagement and access to the meeting with those who are face to face, so they're not almost second-class citizens in that meeting. So I just want to check that was going to be part of the testing of whatever model we choose. Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah, so the testing is not some kind of laboratory thing. It's actually we know somewhere where we can actually see a version of this in operation, and we could go along and have a play. So I think we'd set that up in such a way that we had some in and some out. I imagine that's what we'd do.
Thanks very much, John. Paul may have a perspective on this as well. So Paul, please do come in.
Yeah, no, just very briefly, Max, and again, thanks, John, for the inquiry. I think it's a classic dynamic where the technology will take us so far, and then we need to just agree some rules of engagement in reality, because actually it's a cultural thing often that means that we miss the person out of our immediate line of sight. So it'll be a balance, John. We will try and ensure that the technology doesn't create anybody as a second-class citizen, and then we'll work through with the chair and colleagues the extent to which they keep abreast of being truly inclusive in relationship to conducting the meeting.
Thanks very much, Paul. So, John, excuse me, I can see your notes in chat as well. Thank you. And the point being is that we do agree with the principle of hybrid meetings mean full access to all those, for all those present. And Paul, you've articulated that very well, and John too, I think. And I realise that there's more to it perhaps than just technology. It's about the way in which the meeting is run. So yes, I get that. Thank you very much indeed. John, thank you for raising that. Absolutely appropriate. This is what we do. We raise things to be done, and we need to make sure we're doing it to our satisfaction. Thanks, everybody. Shall we move to section 3 then? And colleagues, I hope, have read the report, my report from the chairman. 10 sections, focused particularly, I think, on the good engagement we have with governors. And I commended Sarge earlier for his briefing on performance to governors. And may I share with directors that on the 2nd of next month, 2nd of February, governors and non-executive directors are going to get together in an informal development session intended for us to have an open discussion about the way in which we conduct our business. And I'm looking forward to that. There are no tensions, there's no issues particularly that arise, but it's about recognising the last 2 or 3 years where we've worked so much online that we've perhaps missed those individual meetings and face-to-face work. So pleased to inform you, and by the way, that will be independently facilitated by an NHS provider colleague. And again, for the benefit of directors, I managed to speak to that colleague yesterday, and there's no doubt he brings a great deal of experience, and we'll have a good session there. So looking forward to that on the 2nd of February. I think I would only add to my report that colleagues may know I'm currently chairing the West Yorkshire Association of Acute Trusts. So certainly the vascular work, it was great to hear some detail on that today. And that last week there was a chairs meeting where all West Yorkshire chairs come together, and I'll be careful in my use of language. It's a public board meeting, but just to share with you that there's a recognition that we have a very strong and good West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership, which is well respected. But I think it's fair to say that that's not been the same experience maybe everywhere in the rest of the country. And we're just aware that there are ways in which perhaps West Yorkshire can help developing areas with their integrated care boards and their health and care partnerships. So, of course, I could take up the full board meeting talking about the sorts of things we talked about there, but we're on it. We're a developing partnership. And interestingly, perhaps an increased desire on the part of NHS England to communicate directly with the ICB. I don't criticise that, but we have to, of course, as providers, be aware of that and make sure that we're well sighted on what's happening. So I hope I'm not saying anything inappropriate there, but just to share with you that there's some ongoing debate about development of ICBs. I think we're fortunate in West Yorkshire in that we do have a strong one. And colleagues will remember that there's a principle of subsidiarity, isn't there, that's often repeated, a principle of subsidiarity. So thank you very much. That's I don't need, I think, to go into any further detail. You'll see that the report contains some personal details of the elections, etc. Delighted to note that, for example, that our Deputy Chair and Lead Governor both return as governors. But shall I leave it at that unless there's any particular questions of me? Okay, and so thank you, everybody. You're asked to note that. I will remain available, of course, if anything arises that you think, I wonder if Max has got a perspective on that. Shall I turn to John now then, please? We do have, of course, this time a written report from the Chief Executive that I'm sure colleagues will have read and noted. But of course, we would always want to give our Chief Executive, John in this case, the opportunity to bring us right up to date with any key messages to share with directors. So John, should I turn to you, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It is serendipitous, isn't it, that the Chief Exec's report has moved to written on the occasion that Mel sends her apologies, so I can just refer you to the paper and take it as read. I think if Mel were here, there's probably one or two things she would just highlight, although I'm going to try not to replicate everything that's already on the written page. We have been through an incredibly busy spell, so in terms of patients, we have seen high numbers, and despite that, we've maintained a very strong level of performance, and I think the board should note that and commend it. It's really been a remarkable performance by our people. Notwithstanding that, we're not out of the woods. There will be peaks, there will be troughs in demand and in the prevalence of different conditions, but it's been a very strong performance throughout. We're currently working on the planning guidance, which, as always, was issued on or around Christmas Eve. And so we need to get a first cut of data for the coming year for activity, for workforce and for finance. And that will be collated at place and ultimately at ICB. So just as you've been saying, Chair, a lot of this work now happens collectively. So that's our planning work, which is ongoing. If the board's got questions about that, I'm sure Saj will be happy to provide more detail. In terms of our people, there's a good write-up here. You'll be well aware that we're in a period of ongoing industrial action. The next strike that we'll be directly affected by will be industrial action from the RCN on the 6th and 7th of February, but there's other industrial action being mooted. So to date, we've worked well with the unions to manage the implications of this, and we want to commend the professionalism of our colleagues, those who were on strike and those who weren't on strike, in making sure that we kept our patients safe. It's a careful balance to be struck, and again, I think if colleagues have got further questions about the detail of all of that, Pat or Karen or others would be happy to discuss. In terms of our place, the emphasis in this report is on the work we're doing to look after our people through anti-poverty strategies, which is an item on the agenda for today, which we'll talk about some more, and about some of the other work we're doing collaboratively with partners across Bradford District and Craven, flagging the appointment of a new system lead for the voluntary and community sector, that's Sam Keithley, who many of you will know. And then finally, in terms of partners, I think it's exactly the point you were making, Chair, about the Integrated Care Board for West Yorkshire. There's been a development session just before Christmas. We shouldn't be too self-congratulatory, but West Yorkshire is in a strong place. It builds on a tradition of partnership working, and that's being taken forward through the current arrangements with the emphasis on subsidiarity. And you really feel that when you do things like the planning process, the natural tendency is to have a conversation about how do we work together well, how do we spend the Bradford pound wisely. And I think we've moved a long way from, let's say, the inception of foundation trusts in the early 2000s, when the whole culture was one of competition rather than collaboration. It feels like a very different environment, and I think that's very evident in Bradford and in West Yorkshire more generally. So that's the Chief Exec's report. As I say, I'm sure my colleagues will be able to help if colleagues have got specific questions on individual items.
Thanks very much indeed, John. And I think we feel assured that there's a collective understanding amongst executive colleagues of the where we are at the moment situation. And I'm sure colleagues, non-executive particularly, will join me as chair in thanking executive colleagues for the way in which they've pulled together and planned the way in which we've been going over the last 2 or 3 months, particularly this board period, of course, a period of COVID, flu, industrial action, and plenty else, of course. So thank you to executive colleagues for pulling together and planning as best we can to provide the best services for the people of Bradford that we possibly can. Thank you. Mohammed, please do come in.
Thanks, Max. I hope you can hear me. I've used
yes,
a set of mics. Thank you. So thanks for that, John. I really appreciate the update. I just wanted to pick up an area that's a bit of an outlier, and I guess it's difficult, isn't it? When in general we're doing really good work around civility and embedding kindness, but there are always some outliers in that. So as a NED, I've had one particular area of the organisation kind of repeatedly raise issues around, how the staff feel at work, level of support, and those kind of issues. I don't think it's appropriate for me perhaps to mention which area it is and the open board. The point I want to make is that this is an area that we've raised some concerns about, and then we've had some moves to try and remedy that, but it seems to not be moving at a pace that I feel comfortable with, particularly in light of I keep hearing back from individuals within that area that they still don't feel that there's a real change. And some of the specific examples have been that when individuals have left that area because of their perceived behaviours at work and support, that they weren't offered an exit interview. And I raised that previously with Max and exec colleagues, and then I was informed that they can absolutely ask for an exit interview, and I think that was remedied. But then similarly, in the same area, I've had another colleague reach out who said, I applied for an internal vacancy, I was rejected and given an automated response that no feedback would be provided. Again, I've raised that internally, and then I've been told, oh, absolutely, feedback would be provided. And I just feel that these are exceptions where they're repeatedly arising in the same area. And I know this area is an outlier, and I know it's not reflective of our culture and the way that we work. And that's why perhaps I'm picking up on it, because it is so different from the rest of us, from the rest of our organisation. I just wanted to kind of, as a NED, raise this, because it'd be remiss of me not to, when colleagues are raising it with me repeatedly, to say, look, this is obviously an outlier. How do we get the traction in this area to bring it in line with our overall kind of values and culture, that it shouldn't require individuals raising it with NEDs and then NEDs having to pick it up with exec colleagues, and every time the response is, oh, that shouldn't have happened and we'll fix it. But it's repeatedly happening, and that's disappointing, I think, for me.
Thank you, Mohammed. Mohammed, were you hoping for any particular response now, or did you want to make a note of this for directors to be aware and
Yeah, I'm
continue
not expecting a detailed response. I didn't know where else to raise it, Max, and it felt kind of under people, felt the most appropriate place perhaps to raise it. And perhaps the only thing I was expecting for was perhaps to note it here in our public board and to get that commitment, which I know is there, around let's try and fix this. But I'm hoping for kind of more traction in trying to remedy this, because it is an outlier and it's been an ongoing issue, and it just feels to me that we perhaps aren't making some of the progress that I would have liked to have seen, especially based on the feedback I'm getting from colleagues in that area.
So thank you very much, Mohammed. So you raised the issue of traction in this particular area, and I think you fairly have said this is perhaps not the place for a full debate and discussion about those issues, but you rightly wish to bring to board's attention the challenges perhaps in that area of our organisation. John, thank you. Would you wish to come in and comment, please?
Yeah, so everything you just said, Chair, I think I endorse. It is always, all feedback is good, isn't it? And it is helpful to hear this in board. It's a bit difficult to respond in the abstract, but I think it's right that Mohammed has handled this the way he has and has not sort of named and shamed in an open board. I think there's more going on in this area than is evident. I think we've got a number of developments underway that I'd be happy to talk about, because I think the concerns that Mohammed raises require a response, and perhaps we might be able to say a word about this in closed board. So I don't want to be too cryptic about this. I just think the professional way to talk about this is to explain what actions we're taking and see if the board is assured that we're moving in the right direction. But it's helpful to hear, and yeah, we'd be very happy to talk about that.
Thanks very much, John. Mohammed, entirely appropriate to raise, and thank you for noting and having that recording that issue. And we note Pat's comment in chat as well that there is indeed later this month a face-to-face meeting amongst executive directors and and myself and yourself, Mohammed, if you're available. I'm assuming you hopefully are.
Yeah.
And we will actually discuss this issue in detail. So yeah, it's not being lost, but we do take Mohammed's point about perhaps traction hasn't quite been there. John, thank you for the additional context as well from your understanding. That's appreciated. Mohammed, thank you for raising. Yeah. Okay. And may I check whether does anybody else have any further comments or issues arising from the Chief Executive report, please? Anything we'd want to advise John regarding? No? Great stuff. Okay. Thanks very much for that, John. And again, in keeping with this meeting, we will, of course, anything from myself or the Chief Executive might be raised. Callum, please do come in.
Sorry, I was fiddling with my buttons, couldn't get my hand up quick enough. I'm just conscious that there's 2 documents been attached to the Chief Exec report at short notice, and whether there was any questions arising from them. So both are good news. So one is the Bradford exiting the maternity services programme that we were part of. So we've got notification of that last week. The other is the very brief feedback from the inspection of maternity services. And as you can see, there are 3 things that were positive and 3 things we could do even better. Just to give some assurance around those things, we were still in the inspection period when we received this feedback. So we were in a position to do something about the areas of improvement. So there's 3 areas there. Oversight of the waiting room for patients from MAC remains a concern. So this was following triage. So they were impressed that we were doing BSOTs and triage, but wanted to know why we weren't then doing intentional rounding, which is a thing that you do in A&E after triage. And I think maternity is slightly different. But they did comment that there was no segregation in the waiting area from day unit patients and emergency assessment patients. So the estates did a fantastic job overnight and ripped up some flooring and repainted some walls. So there's now a dedicated different colour area for MAC patients. And we've sent them photos of that as well. There was some similar findings from the last inspection of maternity services relating to medicines management. Similar yet very different. I mean, I think we worked it out that the error rate was something like 0.04%. So there was a packet of tablets found in a drawer from the EPR cart, and one of the EPR carts. I'm kicking myself because we found that when we rolled out EPR in the adults, that staff just put them there, and So anyway, we've rectified that, put a proper drug cart in there and things. So all that's been, it's not an area that you'd normally have drugs, you see, and that's why, and somebody's just put it there, we think. There was an oral medication that had expired by 6 days but hadn't been given to any patient, and that's part of a wider trust-wide programme which we're feeding into. And there was also concerns around the disposal of epidural fluids. It's really complicated. It'll take me hours to go into the detail of this, but there is absolutely zero risk of harm to patients. When a woman is in labour, they have an epidural that is put in through a syringe. They don't get the full dose of that. What is left then goes into a separate book and is documented and disposed of, but it's disposed of in a separate room into granules so that somebody can't reuse the drug. All that happened, but there was, in a 3-month period, there was, I think 6, 7 occasions where a second person hadn't signed that book to say that they'd witnessed the disposal of. So the risk individual, we have reinforced that process, and it wasn't part of our checks, and it's not part of any recognised audits that we have either. So we've put that in place and worked closely with pharmacy to do that. And they just asked some additional information around cleaning as well, but that was, I think it was because we've moved to the new cleaning standards, and they were expecting to see tick lists on the back of the toilet doors, which we just don't have anymore. So we've sent that information as well. So I'm still hoping for a positive outcome. The positive findings that they reported back are really, really positive. So, you know, to say that there was positive cultures in incident reporting, they recognised flow and theatre, and that's from induction of labour right through to theatres. So there were big issues when they came last time. And the fact that they've said that we've got positive MDT relationships in maternity is fantastic, because you'll also know that that is a failure in many reports that we see. The maternity team worked extremely hard, and Sarah will be joining us later, and I'm sure we'll thank them. No matter what the outcome, there's definite marked improvement been shown.
Yeah, Gavin, thank you very much, and thank you for reminding colleagues of the later submission, which is entirely appropriate, of course, of those additional papers in the spirit of bringing to directors' attention the very latest information. Thanks, Karen. Thanks for reminding us of that. Sugri, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thank you, Max and Karen. Thank you for picking that up and highlighting some of the areas. We will, of course, await the full report, and obviously this is initial and interim feedback, and things do change, as we know, when the final report comes through. I think it'll probably be better for us to have a conversation perhaps at that point, or a look. The only bit that I wanted to pick up was the reference to repeat concerns or things that were found in previous inspections, and that kind of leads us to think about the effectiveness of our action plans and the monitoring of those action plans, where, you know, in terms of remedial action that we took last time, and also whether what was found this time was already known to us, and if there's anything that we could or should tweak in terms of our own internal audits or monitoring. So, you know, are these areas that we could have picked up and addressed sooner, or were they in fact known, but because of the kind of wider operating context, we weren't able to address in time. But as I say, it's probably better to have that look once we get the final report through. But well done on the achievements. And I also saw the letter that we had in terms of sort of moving away from the support programme that was in place. That clearly recognises the work that's been done.
That's great, Sugri, thank you. Yeah, Karen, go, sorry.
Yeah, just to say, so I do believe we've got extremely robust action plans. They've been looked at by internal audit and scrutinised to the nth degree. Been picked up, which is the repeat, is very different from the last repeat. So we've stressed that as well. So previously there was gaps in CD registers, drugs weren't being checked properly. We absolutely know that the CD books are checked every day. The stock policies are done. In fact, they're done twice a day on labour ward, and that is rechecked, and there's a process for that. The bit that was missing is there's a different register for epidurals, Previously on inspection, they actually found a bag of epidural fluid in a drawer. So thankfully they didn't find that, because the process of the storage and the administration of them and the stock is there, it's audited, it's processed. The bit that we weren't including on our checks was the double checking of the disposal of them. So we didn't do that last bit of the process check. That's something that we've now rectified. That's now being checked twice daily, and the coordinator goes back and addresses it at the moment in time. I have a degree of sympathy, because I think at times when you're very busy, it's something that is a tidy up job as such, and the way you dispose of it is in a completely different area from where you sign it, and then you have to get the keys to do that. So it's quite a complex thing. And as I said again, the risk of a harm to a patient is absolutely negligible. The risk of somebody stealing it and taking it and using it for illicit drug use, my medical colleagues tell me that it wouldn't be a very good drug to use for illicit drug use. So again, we've probably got minimal risk there. But you're right, we picked up on that as well. And that's why I think the wording is some similar, as opposed to repeat or similar SUGRA. I've discussed it at length with the inspectors too. And what they've said is that they will be fair and proportionate. And as you're aware, they use a decision-making tree when they look at things like that.
Thanks very much, Karen. That's great. And SUGRA, thank you for, of course, with your experience, reminding us to be vigilant to any potential repeated issues. And Karen's clearly on that. So thank you for the additional context as well, Karen. That's helpful. Thanks. So those are issues have arisen from the report from the Chief Executive. I'm grateful for them. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll be moving now into delivery of the Trust clinical strategy. There are 3 items that John Holden invites us to note, but I see now that we do have, right on time, our colleague Helen Farmer, the Joint Programme Director from Transformation Programmes. So Helen, welcome, and can you hear me okay?
Good morning. Yes, I can. Thanks, Max.
Great stuff, Helen. Well, we have a habit of keeping people waiting 10 or 15 minutes before we actually then, welcome them and get them going. But we've done well for yourself here. We're straight on to item 9 now. So it does mean we're skipping item 8 for a moment. But given that you've joined us right on time, Helen, it's great. So we're going to talk about the Shipley Hospital situation, the update there. And I'll turn to John in the first place, just to see whether he would wish to orientate directors as to what we're to think about. We have a paper, of course, Helen, and it's great to have you with us, and warm welcome to you and good morning. So John, please, I'll pass to you.
Yeah, thanks. Very little preamble, because Helen is the expert on all of this. I'm not sure if colleagues around this virtual board meeting are familiar with Shipley Hospital, but I think hospital is perhaps a bit of a stretch. It's a large house. But we have provided clinical services from there. Some of them have already been migrated out. There's a small amount remaining, and there's a question now about consulting and engaging on the future provision of services there, because arguably it's not the right place for 21st century healthcare. We can do it better in other locations, but we need to work with the community to make sure that's the right thing. And Helen can talk to you about the process that's going on at the moment to have that conversation. Helen.
Thanks, John. Good morning, Helen.
Morning, all. Thanks for having me. Thanks, John. You've pretty much covered everything I had bulleted down here, so I'll just disappear. No, I'll just to kind of recap on Shipley Hospital. For those who may not be as familiar with the site, it's based in North Bradford. It's a site that's owned by Property Services, but Bradford Teaching Hospitals use it as part of their community estate and have done for a number of years. It's been a number of services over the years as well. More recently, there were a small number of services there, and as at today, only community and outpatient physiotherapy services remain on that site on the ground floor. When we originally commenced discussions in 2019, which was off the back of a proposal to relocate some services from there, we did undertake undertook some engagement via our community-based engagement partner, who are voluntary sector partner, out with patients who currently use the site or formerly use the site. And we also took 2 papers to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So this paper that you see that has been attached today is the 3rd paper that's been to Scrutiny Committee over the last 3 to 4 years. We paused the work in 2019 because obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, just as we were about to start the consultation, COVID came along. So we didn't commence with the work, and so we've just restarted that in the last few months. So the purpose of bringing the paper to the board today is to inform you of the proposals to undertake a 6-week consultation, public consultation, which is due to start at the end of February. And we're asking the public to comment on relocating physiotherapy, community physiotherapy services to another of our sites, which is Westbourne Green, where there are a number of services already provided from Westbourne Green, other NHS providers within our district. And we'll also outline in that paper, we're going to be very honest with the public and say, unfortunately, retaining Shipley isn't an option due to the age and structure of the building, the work that would be required to bring that back to the state of a modern health premise, and then find partners to go in there and utilise that space is obviously makes it an incredible difficult option in the current financial climate to propose as something that we would consider. So we have utilised an external engagement agency called Stand, who are an expert in this area, who've got quite a lot of experience with regards to public consultations and involvement exercises. So they're going to be the ones who are taking and guiding us through this process to make sure that we follow all the necessary steps. We're also working closely with NHS England as part of their strategic sense check assurance process to make sure we cover off all the relevant regulatory and governance requirements that we are required to do when we consult on relocating services. So very brief, just generally to update the board that that's our intention, and obviously take any questions or comments that you would like us to consider as part of that work that we might not have yet thought of or that we would need to take into account. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you for joining us in person as well, Helen, so that any director who might have a query can ask that. I confess to being one of those directors who does live very close to Shipley Hospital, and I do know the affection with which the building is held locally. I also recognise there's very little actually provided from that now, so I do see that. But yes, I'm very close to it myself. Any questions, thoughts, queries? We're being asked to be aware of the proposal for the consultation. Timescales is 6 to 9 months, and the proposed relocation of those physiotherapy services to Westbourne Green. Mohammed, may I bring you in, please?
Thank you, Max. Thank you, Helen, for that update. I mean, it's always sad, isn't it, when we can't maintain buildings that have been there for a long time and people have perhaps a kind of a childhood memory and a family history to that location. Inevitably, we can't maintain every building, can we? And so that's what we have to modernise. My only comment really was around if the building's been there for more than 100 years. One of the things that's quite sad sometimes to see, and I've seen it in other areas of West Yorkshire, is that old hospital land is sold off and it's redeveloped, but has no connection or no kind of history linking it back, no kind of monument or anything else, or no symbols to connect it back to its history. And I wonder whether that's something perhaps that may assuage some of the local public in terms of some of their concerns, if there was an ongoing link to the history of the site, however it's redeveloped, that may be a connection back to its past, that people may feel is still a connection to the community, rather than it just being a completely greenfield site redeveloped with no connection to its history at all.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Helen, before I bring you back in, I'll just see whether anybody else has any query, and then if you wish to comment on any thoughts, that's great. In support of Mohammed's point, I know you'll know this, Helen, but of course it was a maternity hospital back in the day, and so a lot of people who live locally, certainly of my age, were born at Shipley Hospital, and so there is a historic connection, Mohammed. You're absolutely right there. Yeah. If there are no further comments, I'll just see if Helen would wish to respond to that idea of marking the connection to its history.
Yeah, thanks, Mohammed, for that. It's a really good point. I raised it yesterday with NHS Property Services on our weekly call because because I suspect this will come up as part of the public consultation as well, is what's our commitment as a partner who would be selling off that site. Obviously, it doesn't belong to us, but it belongs to Property Services. What's our ability to be able to make some kind of, I guess, contingent factors on what we do and how that is used as an asset, and unfortunately they informed me that that kind of doesn't sit within our control. I think what we could do is ask whoever, it's a two-part process. They will offer the asset for sale within the public estate, and then they'll offer the asset for, Mark, Holloway, you'll have to come in and correct me if I go wrong on any of this. They'll sell it within the public estate, and if nobody's keen to buy it within the public estate, then obviously it goes out wider than that. From a private perspective, we can certainly ask that is considered as part of that, and then it would be on the person buying the asset whether they would be willing to consider that. What I should have probably also mentioned, sorry, it was remiss of me not to do so, we're aware that because the site was originally gifted by Norman Ray number of years ago, a number of sites were gifted within Shipley and within the Northcliffe area as well. We're just making sure we can't find anything related to the covenant. We've been through archives. We would ask the council to go through archives. We are pursuing that further just to make very clear that there isn't anything, because that would obviously restrict our ability to do something with that. So if we do find something, we'll notify people of that in due course. Mark, help me out where I've missed anything there. Apologies.
Thank you, Helen. Mark, do come in.
Yeah, thank you, and hi everybody. Alan, we just to say, no, you're absolutely right in everything you said. Well done, because actually it will have to go on the public land register formally to lodge. So obviously that's something that we have to do by law effectively. So we will put it on that register, so people will be able to look at the register to look at the application for land, and then it can go off the register and be dealt with separately. And I think just in terms of that point, we can't, you won't be able, Helen, of course, to specifically stipulate anything because it's not our land as such to sell. It's NHS Property Services. But I think throughout the process, of course, I'm sure you'll pick up now, if there is any restrictive covenant or anything we can imply in any land transfer, then of course we could be able to put that forward to NHS Property Services exactly as has just been described to see if that can be considered. So we can absolutely do that and hope that there's something there that can be carried on if you want to kind of note its history, really. So I think we'll ask all the right questions and do the right thing.
That's very clear. Thanks very much. And Helen, I think I took from your initial response, given that you discussed it only yesterday, the idea of somehow marking the site is definitely on your list, and that you'll be pursuing that. And I think that's what Mohammed would hope to have heard. Thanks very much indeed. Colleagues, we've been asked simply to note the position. It's been managed, of course, through the Health and Care Partnership, of which myself and Mel, of course, are members of the board there. And I'm sure John, as our Director of Integration, will happily take any views, comments, or things that you may hear and pass those through to Helen. But of course, Helen also remains available to us. So it was good of Helen to come in person to bring our attention to what's happening there. Yeah, these are always difficult processes. And remember, although we appear to be talking about something that we know is going to happen, we are going into a consultation period. So we will be listening. That's an important point, perhaps, for us to recognise. Helen, have we heard and said everything that you would have hoped we would do?
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for having me to go through it.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay.
Take care.
Have a great rest of the day, Helen.
You too.
Bye now. Thank you. So thanks, colleagues. We're asked to note that at paper 9, yeah, it's certainly sensitive to people in this area. But we will with somebody like Helen running the job there, I'm sure it will get done properly. So that's where we are. Okay, John has 2 other items to ask us to note, please. So just skipping back to item 8, we're going to do the Green Plan annual update to board. So John, may I defer to you, please?
Thank you, Chair. And this is, as you say, just to note, it's a simple update just to keep the board apprised of this activity. It's probably something that's more suited in a way to a development discussion at some point or an evening thing or whatever, but I just thought it would be helpful. We brought a report this time last year, so I want to keep you cited. We published our Green Plan in January 2020. We brought an update, I think, last year. We have an implementation group which monitors progress in doing the things that the Green Plan says. It is obviously partly about net zero, but it's also about the broader sustainability agenda, and we've got 4 strands to it. We look at utilities, travel and transport, waste management and procurement. It's a bit like the 4 evils or something, the things that we've got to really get into to try and improve the agenda on this. So by way of an update, what's happened in the last year, so a few notable things. Our Chief Exec, Mel, launched a walking route from St Luke's to the city centre. Colleagues, I'm sure, are aware that there's quite a lot of developments going on in the city centre around Jacobs Well and pedestrianisation. There'll be more cycle routes. And linked to that, we want to get more people walking at least to the St Luke's site. It shouldn't be necessary to make so many car journeys there. So this was just making it easier for people landing in the railway station to get themselves across to St Luke's. We held a second Green Summit for staff. It was another virtual one, but it was another opportunity for people who do things in their private lives and sometimes get frustrated that it's harder at work to do the things that they'd like to do. And they raised all sorts of issues, segregating waste, electric vehicles, etc., etc. How could they contribute? So that was a really positive thing. We sent out more than 1 million electronic letters in the last year. As you'll know from other presentations, we've really pushed virtual services, and this is really important. There's only so much we can do with solar panels and heat and power. We need to think about how we change the model of care we provide. So a move to virtual services is really the way to get into a more sustainable a model of care. And we're also thinking about a new head of sustainability post. A number of other trusts are doing this. We do have some resource in the trust. Colleagues will have known Craig Wilson, our previous energy and sustainability manager. He's moved on, has been succeeded by Don McKenzie, which is great. I had a good chat with Don recently. But there's an opportunity here for us to do something broader across the trust. So we're looking into that, the idea of a head of sustainability who can bring all of those different things together. I'll just say a brief word about the 4 different strands that we look at. I mentioned already. So on sustainable transport and travel, we've got plans to move towards an e-expense approach, which will be very helpful, because it will help us understand the way in which people travel with a greater degree of accuracy than we've got at the moment. And then we can start to think about how we use that information, how we incentivise people, and whether we're sending the right signals. We're also looking at the tender for trust leased vehicles and the opportunities there to move towards more of an electrified fleet. In terms of the sustainable procurement, so we now have a 10% weighting for social value and sustainability as part of all of our tenders. That's a big step forward, because it means that when we look at best value, it's not just about cost and quality, it's also factoring in social value as an element. It sort of legitimizes that as part of the consideration, which is really helpful. We're not limited to 10%, but there has to be a 10% weighting. We may actually find in the way we look at some things that the social value element is bigger. In terms of waste management, the thing that we're flagging here is food recycling now fully in place at St Luke's. So there's more we can do with food waste. I mean, there's all sorts of ideas out there that we need to look at in ways of generating power from food waste and all sorts of things. But at the moment, what we really need to do is just make sure that we get better segregation of waste across our estate. There's been some really good work done on cardboard. There's more to do on plastics. There's more regular collections happening. It's really good work, and it is making a difference. And then finally, in terms of utilities, I probably need to bring Mark in if anybody wants a better explanation of this, but long story short, we now have a much better oversight of the energy that we consume and where it's being consumed and how it's being consumed. And that in turn helps us manage our carbon emissions and keep track of them better. One of the points I made, I think the last time I updated board, was that we could show over the last decade we'd reduced our carbon emissions by about a quarter. But we might actually see the emissions increase in the short term, and that's a direct consequence of actually better monitoring and better measurement. So the more that we get a handle on this, which is really important, paradoxically, we might actually see the numbers go up a bit, reflecting the fact that we're better able to measure what we're doing. But it is important. If we don't measure, then we don't know what we're doing. So over the coming 12 months, I've talked about potential for a head of sustainability. I think that will be really important. We'll continue to hold green forums to involve our people in this in work. There will be more guidance, tools and strategies launched by NHS England, and indeed we're going to develop a new green plan for our organisation based on the latest guidance. We're working with all of the CSUs and departments across the trust because many of them want to do things off their own bat. There's best practice we can share. But there are challenges in doing this, and we shouldn't understate them. It is, you know, if we're trying to do decarbonisation, that is a very, very expensive proposition. Ideally, we'd have a brand new hospital on a brand new site, and then we could build in all of the latest technology and make it a net zero hospital. Trying to do it in an estate like ours of, you know, a considerable vintage is very hard indeed. Even doing the scoping work, even doing the planning work to tell you how you would get there is a very expensive proposition because of the amount of detail required. And you know, it's not a good time to be saying we've got to spend money on this because there are so many other pressures. So I'm not catastrophizing. I'm not saying we can't do this. I'm just saying it is very difficult. And as we said in our strategy, which we published last year, you know, we can't not address the priority that is sustainability, but it always feels like it's sort of 10 years away, where there's other more pressing priorities in the next short period. So somehow, as a board, we have to get that balance right between the urgent and the important. I'll leave that there. Thanks.
No, that's extremely helpful context, John. Thank you. I know a couple of colleagues want to come in. I just have one very quick question, which is we're required to produce a new green plan, John. Have we got a rough idea of when we might hope to publish that? And is there a way in which directors can either steer or contribute to the work being done there? How would you recommend that?
Yeah, so starting with the second question first, yes, absolutely. I want to involve the board in it because I think it needs us collectively to commit because of some of those, you know, difficult choices. I think we probably need either a session in board development or something discreetly just to work through it. In terms of timing, probably the back end of the year. There isn't a fixed deadline from NHS England. They're encouraging all organisations to revisit their plans. It doesn't mean we rip up the one we've got, but we definitely need to change the direction of it. There's an ever greater emphasis on net zero. I would suggest the autumn, but I won't be more precise than that at the moment, Max. And I would want to do it inclusively, absolutely.
No, that's helpful, John. Thanks very much. So, and as you say, we may have some sort of development discussion regarding that, but obviously, John, I assume again that you would be happy to take any views if people have a burning desire on green issues.
No pun intended. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, yes, burning. Yeah. Okay, Mohammed, please do come in.
Thanks, Max. This may be, I've got 3 points. I think one of them is probably more Mark than John. So the one for Mark is more around recognising what John is saying around the age of our estate and its current kind of fabric. Do we do anything like heat calculations for each of our buildings? So heat loss calculations. So are we aware of kind of the efficiency of different parts of our estate and so we can track that? And I was pleased to hear from John about getting more data and being able to track what's happening in terms of energy usage. That's point one. Point two was around inhalers and inhaler use and inhaler procurement. So kind of the inhalers we use for asthma, COPD, etc. The national NHS strategy on net zero and green strategy highlight that 3% of the NHS impact on the environment from carbon is actually inhalers used for asthma and COPD, and there's a real push within primary care around moving patients away from those kind of really harmful inhalers to actually slightly more expensive inhalers, but they're more environmentally friendly. And so the point there is around, do we have anything around recycling of inhalers as we in hospital as we're beginning to recycle those inhalers in primary care, and is our strategy around procurement and formulary of prescribing of those inhalers in alignment with that NHS overall strategy, which applies I think primarily primary care, but I'm not sure where it fits with secondary care. And the final point, perhaps back to you, Mark, was around are we looking at things like heat pumps and other ways of perhaps heating our estate? there's been a lot of kind of interest in this, and obviously from a layperson who's not in hospital very often, every time I go, I always find it very hot, and there's a challenge in there about maintaining the temperature within a hospital environment, and whether we've looked at different ways of heating our estate.
Thank you very much indeed, Mohammed. And Mark, I'll just see what other comments are made. I'm hoping you might be making a note of some of those. And of course, Mark, as a courtesy to you, if there's a more detailed response required, if you wish to provide that later to directors, very happy to do that. I don't want people to feel they have to give full explanation, but that's terrific points raised by Mohammed. Thank you. Altaf, please do come in.
Hi, thanks, Max. Hi, John. I think I like everybody else probably around the virtual table will receive my pay slip in the post. It's a paper-based elaborate thing with folds in it and security, and the postman has to bring it to me. I think a lot of people around Europe and in private sector are moving to paperless in terms of payroll and payslip, and that not only is more greener, but it sort of improves the staff experience, because one of the things that a lot of people started to do is actually join up with people who do things called incentives in the corporate world, and they provide employees with freebies, and they're like access to that as a marketplace. So it not only becomes something that doesn't cost you anything to do, but it actually improves the kind of visibility of people's pay records, P60s. They can actually see dashboards to see how they did in terms of overtime and remuneration, and it also gives management an opportunity to push nice things to employees as well, which might give us an edge over everybody else. I mean, I hasten to add, and I probably you need a separate conversation with Paul and Matthew. I don't know what our payroll system looks like and how easy it might be to integrate such a piece of automation to it. Now, there's a lot of referenceability around this, and it's all very secure. Thanks.
Thank you. No, that's great. Really good points, actually, and a demonstration of why it's sensible to have this conversation at board. Thank you. So we had kind of 4 points raised there, didn't we? The age of the estate, heat calculations, inhaler procurement, heating issues, and online paperless systems in a payroll. Are we making sufficient use of that? Mark, should I turn to you first and see you don't have to give full responses if you prefer to say, look, I'll drop a note to people, but I'll turn to you, Mark.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair. And no, they're really, really good and apt questions. And the problem I've got is they are very, very difficult, detailed engineering answers, I think, really to them. But let me just try and, I suppose, paint the picture a little bit. So we know, for example, we need to achieve net zero by 2040. A decarbonisation supply chain plan by 2045. And I think 2 other markers in the sand we've got is the requirement by 2032 to achieve an 80% reduction to a 1990 reference year, and of course fully net zero by 2040. So those do play into answering the 2 questions I think Mohammed raised, because I've scribbled down heat loss if you want, and obviously heat pumps and air source heat pumps, which are big topical things at the moment. So to answer the first part to that, we've invested heavily despite us having very, very old buildings that aren't so greatly insulated. Having said that, we've done a hell of a lot of work over the last 15, 20 years, and we've got to the best position we actually physically can do. So we have worked out all the heat loss calculations for the building fabric across all of our estate. What we then need to do is understand the energy that's going into those areas, and that's been the challenge. So we've invested in what's called building energy management systems, BEMS. These are it's the computer network infrastructure that's controlled by estates, and I'm going to badge this up as a very, very big and fancy control panel that makes things switch on and off, controls heat, cooling, hot water systems, etc. So we've done a lot of work in that, and we've also done as much sub-metering within all of that as possible. So we can actually work out to most of our estate how much power and how much heat goes into elements of the building. So we have mapped that out, Mohammed, and that's been really helpful for us in trying to work out things that are happening right now to establish a net zero roadmap. So, for example, we have already got a heat decarbonisation plan, and we are working right now to develop not only the kind of net zero plan, but we're actually working on something we're going to call a roadmap. And this is the physical components of how you get from 2023 to 2040. The scary thing in all of this is that actually the cost for us to achieve net zero at this stage without doing detailed engineering works looks like £150 million. So that gives you that number itself gives you some reality in terms of, as John mentioned earlier, the big case of need still for the new hospital and the new hospital programme for that new hospital at Bradford that we've all approved and signed off that's still live. That's got to happen for us because, you know, the investment that's required in the estate, the decant space, the ability to get in and do this will probably not be able to happen because it is too big and too complicated, because we can't just shut the hospital to get everything in to do this. But what we can do is bit by bit, and this is the bit that's important now, that's linked to, if I move from heat loss, if you want, and metering to air and ground source heat pumps. So our sites are primarily operated from a heating and hot water perspective, which is the main kind of hard use of energy. We have 8-bar steam across sites, so we have steam raising plant, and whilst we've got, you know, solar panels and combined heat and power engines, fundamentally we are steam. So the plan is this kind of de-steaming, if you want, of the site to reduce the hard carbon numbers, and for us to be able to achieve those targets is what's needed. And to put in, for example, air source heat pumps, and you're absolutely right, the green plan and the map will be to make the site effectively operated as much as possible on air source heat pumps. And, you know, we're all reading about those nationally and locally. You've heard of them even domestically now. But to do that, going back to the roadmap, and the importance of that is that to actually put air source heat pumps in, we've got to what we call electrify the electrical side, because electricity is the green way of achieving net zero, to put air source heat pumps in. So again, calculations are being worked out right now in this roadmap, because our electrical incoming supply is 2.4 megavolt amps. To get air source heat pump in to go net zero means we need an electrical supply to our site of around 11 to 12 megavolt amps. So when you start building the foundations up and all the building blocks to get to the end result, we've got to start this plan now of building our infrastructure up to actually, for example, you know, the starting point ultimately is to de-steam. But that means putting a gigantic power supply to the site initially, to then start bit by bit cherry picking off all the little small components to start putting these things in. So I'm going to end it at that because I'll get too complicated and technical. But hopefully, Mohammed, that will give you a bit of a principle about what we've done, how we're doing it, and how this roadmap is going to be so important for us. And what I will say, I think, Chair, is at the right point and the right time, once all of this comes together, we will look at coming to a session, if you want, as John was describing earlier, I think, just to present all of this and how we're going to deal with it, what the problem is and the action plan and how we can start tackling it. But the concern, of course, will be, and I'm being very frank, is the amount of work that will need to be done in an old hospital site to get net zero and the cost involved, let alone the practicalities. But we have to demonstrate what that is, and I think we can do that sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mark. I don't ever like people to feel rushed, but of course we have got plenty to deal with. I think helpfully, John suggested at the start of this that this deserves perhaps a bit of time out as a board of directors for us to be able to have this more open conversation. From the point of view of an effective board, can I just be assured, and I'm sure I am, that those 4 points that were raised have all been noted and that you've got them, Mark, you've got them, John, and you know that they were the immediate thoughts of directors. We're helped in the chat as regards Altaf's point regarding payroll system and what the defaults are there. So I'll avoid, of course, we could spend an hour now, couldn't we, talking about these issues, but if I may, I'll be assured that people have said the bits they want to do. John will always receive further thoughts, queries regarding the Green Plan. As he helpfully said, we're going to launch at the end of the year with the new set of actions we intend to take, and we're asked to note where we're going. And I think the promise is that let's before the launch of the Green Plan, John, see if we can find at least an hour, maybe slightly more, of course, for a good open discussion amongst us. And John, I'm reminded, you'll be aware of this, won't you, that of the West Yorkshire Partnership's desire to be seen as, I can't remember the phrase, it was something like world leaders, wasn't it, in sustainability? They actually wanted to be really at the forefront. So I feel assured that we can play our part in that, given the attention that we're giving to the Green Plan. So colleagues, we're asked to note that. Hopefully that's okay. I hope I'm not cutting conversation short, but certainly the points raised have all been noted and will be taken into account. I know there was inhalers, heating, payslips, etc. as well. So, okay, we're asked to note that, and thanks everybody. And there's plenty of work to do then. Again, good reason for bringing it to board is actually we need a little more time on that. Okay, shall we move then to item 10, please? And then we'll take a short break, I think, just to refresh, get back into things. So shall we ask John, again, we've got the paper at item 10, the Bradford Anti-Poverty Strategy. The ASCA board is that we're invited to note the strategy published in November 2022 and to formally commit to support the strategy. Hopefully colleagues have read the papers, but John, would you wish to draw our attention to anything in particular?
No, we really can take this one as read, Chair. The document is there for all to see. We're asked to adopt it. I think that's a kind of local authority figure of speech. I think what this board would normally say is, you know, do we endorse the anti-poverty strategy? Well, my advice would be, I think we already do. I think we already are in many different ways involved in supporting and promoting this work, but this probably gives it an extra level of emphasis and importance. So the question for the board is, are we happy to endorse the Bradford District anti-poverty strategy?
Thanks very much, John. And given that we're at board, we should perhaps note and record the fact of our appreciation to Pat, who spent some time with non-exec directors talking about anti-poverty initiatives in relation to our own staff, indeed, the cost of living crisis, etc. So I appreciate that's only one part of it, but we have thought carefully about our own colleagues. Colleagues, did anything arise in that paper that you would wish to be noted, recorded? Or are you content to take this as a briefing and to commit our support amongst partners to this anti-poverty strategy? I think we can do that without further comment. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, John, and indeed for pulling that together in a read. That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Colleagues, we've done well so far. A lot of very important business, great input, of course, from the CSU team. Shall we take 10 minutes? Shall we come back in at, for me, that would be 11:31 on my computer. I hope that suits you. So shall we take 10 minutes and we can get into academy business? And of course, as ever, we do need time and a refresh, don't we, in order to get into the important business that our academies are dealing with on a monthly basis. So we'll be coming back into quality and patient safety, 11:31, please. Thanks, everybody. See you in